The fluorescent lights of the Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall in Columbus, Ohio, cast long shadows across rows of folding chairs. Outside, November winds scraped bare branches against windows that had witnessed 50 years of stories like this one. Stories of young men who went to war and came home different. Stories of choices made in seconds that echoed through decades. Robert Hayes stood at the wooden podium, his hands gripping its edges the way a man holds onto something to keep from falling. At 74, he still carried himself with the posture the Army had drilled into him half a century ago, but there was a softness around his eyes now, the kind that comes from finally learning to cry. The audience before him was a patchwork of generations. Veterans in their 70s and 80s, their caps marked with war names that sounded like history lessons: Vietnam, Korea, even two from World War II, sitting ramrod straight despite their age. Scattered among them were younger veterans, their eyes carrying the weight of Iraq and Afghanistan. And in the front row, in a wheelchair that gleamed under the lights, sat his daughter. Emma Hayes was 24 now. 5 years had passed since the day that changed everything. 5 years since the choice that saved one life and cost her the use of her legs. 5 years since she taught her father what he should have learned in the rice paddies of Vietnam in 1969. Robert cleared his throat. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Veterans Day means something different to each of us. For some, it is a day to remember friends who never made it home. For others, it is a reminder of youth spent in places whose names we will never forget. He paused, looking down at the notes he had prepared. Then he folded them and tucked them into his pocket. This story did not need notes. It lived in his bones. Today I am going to tell you about my daughter. But first, I need to tell you about Vietnam, and about the day I had to choose between saving one life and saving many. A few heads nodded in the audience. They knew about choices like that. I need to tell you about a boy named Tommy Kern. The words hung in the air like smoke. But more than that, I need to tell you why I have been wrong for 50 years, and how my daughter at 18 years old showed me the truth I was too broken to see. Robert looked at Emma. She gave him a small nod. Her eyes, the same shade of brown as his own, told him it was okay to finally let it go. This is the story of 7 wounds, but it starts with one death, one choice, and one man who could not forgive himself. He took a breath. Let me take you back to when I was 19 years old and thought I understood what it meant to be a hero. The weight of choosing, May 1969, Tay Ninh Province, Vietnam. The rice paddy stretched out like a mirror under the brutal sun, reflecting a sky that promised no mercy. Specialist Robert Hayes crouched behind a dike of earth and dead grass, his medic bag clutched against his chest like a shield that could stop bullets if he believed hard enough. He was 3 months into his tour, 3 months of treating everything from heat exhaustion to sucking chest wounds. 3 months of learning that the human body was both incredibly resilient and terrifyingly fragile. 3 months of discovering that medical school textbooks never mention the sound a 19-year-old makes when he realizes he is dying far from home. The firefight had started 15 minutes ago. Might as well have been 15 hours. Time moved differently when bullets cut the air close enough to feel their heat. "Hayes, get up here!" That was Sergeant Frank Mitchell, 26 years old and already on his second tour. Mitchell was the kind of soldier who seemed immune to fear, or maybe just so familiar with it that they had reached an understanding. He was the squad leader, the one who made the decisions about who moved where and when, the one who would have to write letters home if anyone did not make it back. Robert Lowe crawled through the muddy water, his uniform soaking through, leeches be damned. 20 feet ahead, near the twisted wreckage of a palm tree, he could see the source of Mitchell's urgency. Private First Class Tommy Kern lay crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. 18 years old, from a small town in Pennsylvania where his father ran a hardware store and his mother baked pies for the church social. Tommy had shown Robert pictures once during a quiet night on guard duty, had talked about going home and taking over the family business. Maybe marrying his high school sweetheart, Sarah, having kids, living the kind of normal life that seemed impossible to imagine from a jungle 10,000 miles away. Now Tommy had a hole in his chest the size of a fist. Robert reached him, his training kicking in before conscious thought could freeze him. Assess airway, breathing, circulation. The holy trinity of emergency medicine. But Tommy's breathing was wet and labored, blood frothing at his lips with each desperate gasp. Sucking chest wound, maybe 30 seconds to seal it before the lung collapsed completely. Robert's hands moved with practiced efficiency. Pressure dressing, plastic wrapper from a field dressing kit, sealed on three sides to create a flutter valve. It was elegant in its simplicity, beautiful in its life-saving practicality. "You are going to be okay, Tommy," Robert said, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. "Just breathe. Small breaths. I have got you." Tommy's eyes found his, wide, terrified. But the panic eased a fraction when he saw Robert's face. Medics were magic like that. Just their presence could make soldiers believe they might survive. But then came the sound Robert would hear in nightmares for the next 50 years. Mitchell's voice, sharp as broken glass. "Hayes, we have got to move. Charlie is flanking us. Leave him." Robert's hands never stopped working. "He needs 2 more minutes to stabilize." "We do not have 2 minutes. Mitchell was beside him now, grabbing his shoulder. "Look!" Through the smoke and vegetation, Robert could see them. North Vietnamese regulars moving through the tree line with the practiced efficiency of men who knew this jungle better than any American ever would. They were executing a perfect flanking maneuver. Another minute and the entire squad would be cut off, pinned between enemy fire and the open expanse of the paddy. "We move now or we all die here," Mitchell said. His voice was not cruel. It was simply factual. The mathematics of survival. Robert looked at Tommy, at the kid who wanted to sell hammers and marry Sarah and live in a town where everyone knew everyone and nobody locked their doors at night. "He will die if I leave him. He is going to die anyway, and so will 6 other men if you do not move right now." It was the hardest arithmetic Robert had ever faced. 1 certain death versus 6 possible deaths. 1 boy he could touch versus 6 men he could maybe save by making the hard choice. But Robert's hands did not stop working. "I'm not leaving him, Sergeant." Mitchell stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded, once, sharp. Not agreement, acknowledgement. "Your choice, Hayes, but their blood is on you if this goes wrong." Then Mitchell was gone, shouting orders, pulling the squad back toward a more defensible position. The sounds of combat intensified. More yelling, more shooting. The distinctive crack of AK-47s mixing with the heavier thump of M16s. And Robert stayed with Tommy. 20 minutes. That was how long he stayed. 20 minutes of keeping pressure on the wound, of talking to Tommy about Pennsylvania and hardware stores and a girl named Sarah. 20 minutes of watching a boy's eyes slowly dim like sunset fading to night. Tommy died with his hand in Robert's. His last words were "thank you." Not "tell Sarah I love her," or "make sure Mom knows I was thinking of her." Just "thank you. Thank you for not leaving me alone. Thank you for being here when it ended." When Robert finally made it back to the squad's position, he found 2 men dead and 3 wounded. They had held the position, but barely. Mitchell had to call in air support. Gunships had torn the jungle apart with their miniguns, turning trees to splinters and men to memories. The 2 dead soldiers were Corporal James Chen and Private David Brooks. Chen had a wife and a baby daughter he had never met. Brooks was 20 years old and had been planning to go to college on the GI Bill. Mitchell did not look at Robert when they loaded the bodies onto the medevac helicopter. Did not have to. The weight of those deaths settled onto Robert's shoulders like a yoke he would carry for the next half-century. That night, in a firebase that smelled of sandbags and fear, Mitchell finally spoke to him. "You chose 1 life over the squad. That is not being a medic, Hayes. That is being selfish." Robert wanted to argue, wanted to explain about dignity and mercy and the duty to treat whoever was in front of you. But the words stuck in his throat because maybe Mitchell was right. Maybe he had got Chen and Brooks killed. Maybe his choice to give Tommy a peaceful death had cost 2 other men their lives. "I could not leave him," Robert finally said. "No," Mitchell replied. "You could have. You chose not to. Learn the difference or you are going to get more men killed." Robert never did learn the difference. Not in Vietnam, not in the 40 years that followed. He came home in 1970. Came home to a country that did not want to hear about Vietnam, that saw soldiers not as heroes but as reminders of a war nobody understood and everybody wanted to forget. He took off his uniform and tried to forget too. Went to school, became a paramedic, married a good woman named Linda, who understood that some things could not be talked about. But late at night, when the world was quiet, Robert would lie awake and see Tommy's face, would do the math over and over. 1 life he saved by being there, 2 lives lost because he stayed. The equation never balanced. And he never told anyone, not even Linda, about the day he chose mercy over mission and paid for it with the lives of better men than himself. Seeds of Service, Columbus, Ohio, 2005. The house on Maple Street was the kind of place that appeared in commercials about the American dream. White siding, blue shutters, a lawn that Robert mowed every Saturday morning with military precision, a tire swing hanging from the oak tree in the backyard where 20 years ago he had pushed his infant daughter while Linda watched from the porch and smiled in that way that meant everything was right with the world. Emma Hayes was 10 years old and curious about everything. She asked questions the way some kids breathed, constant and necessary. Why did birds sing? How did planes stay up? What made thunder? Robert and Linda answered patiently, nurturing that curiosity, hoping it would lead her somewhere good, somewhere safe, somewhere that was not a jungle on the other side of the world. On a humid afternoon in late July, Emma discovered the box in the attic. Linda found her there, sitting cross-legged in a shaft of dusty sunlight, surrounded by the accumulated artifacts of Robert's past, old photographs, letters in yellowing envelopes, and there, spread on the floor in front of her like treasures from a tomb, were his medals. The Combat Medical Badge, the Bronze Star, the Vietnam Service Medal with 3 campaign stars, the Purple Heart he had never wanted and certainly never earned in any way that mattered. They gleamed in the half-light, looking much more impressive than they had any right to. Emma held the Combat Medical Badge in her small hands, tracing the edge of the stretcher-bearer symbol with one finger. "Mom," she said, not looking up, "why did Dad never tell me he was a soldier?" Linda knelt beside her daughter. She was 56 now, a school nurse who had seen her share of scraped knees and broken bones and the occasional crisis that required calm hands and a steady voice. She understood healing, and she understood why her husband had hidden these pieces of himself away like shameful secrets. "Your father served in Vietnam," Linda said gently. "It was a hard war. A lot of men came home and just wanted to forget. But he saved people, right? That is what this medal means?" Emma held up the Combat Medical Badge. "Yes, honey, he saved a lot of people." "Then why does he look so sad sometimes?" "When he thinks nobody is watching." Children saw too much. That was the problem with raising a smart, observant daughter. She noticed things. The way Robert stared at nothing during dinner sometimes. The nightmares he never talked about, but that Linda heard through their bedroom wall. The way he flinched at loud noises and always sat with his back to a wall in restaurants. "War is complicated," Linda said. It was not a good answer, but it was the only one she had. That evening, Robert came home from his shift at the fire department where he worked as a paramedic. He found Emma waiting at the kitchen table, his metal box in front of her. For a long moment, he just stood there, lunchbox in hand, still in his uniform. Then he sat down across from her. "You found my box," he said. "I am sorry, I was looking for Christmas decorations and it is okay." He reached out and picked up the Combat Medical Badge, held it the way you hold something that once meant everything and now just means regret. "You want to know about it?" Emma nodded, eyes wide. So Robert told her, not about Tommy, not about the choice, but about being a medic in general terms, about treating soldiers in the field, about trying to save lives in impossible circumstances. He kept his voice steady and factual, the way he did when explaining to Emma how to tie her shoes or solve a math problem. But Emma heard what he did not say, heard it in the pauses between words, in the way his hands trembled slightly when he put the medal back in its box. "You are a hero," she said with the certainty only a 10-year-old can muster. "No," Robert replied, "I was just a medic who tried his best." "That is what heroes do. They try." She said it so simply, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world, as if trying was enough even when it was not, even when trying got people killed. Robert reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. "Emma, listen to me. War takes things from you, pieces you never get back. I do not want that for you. I want you to be a doctor, a nurse, anything that helps people, but not a soldier. Not that. But you said you saved people." "I did. But I also—" He stopped, almost told her, almost said the words that had been choking him for 36 years. "But how do you tell your 10-year-old daughter that you might be responsible for men dying? How do you burden her with your guilt?" "I also lost some," he finished, "and it never stops hurting." Emma squeezed his hand. "Then I will be a doctor, and I will save so many people that it will make up for the ones you lost." She meant it kindly, meant it as comfort, but Robert felt the weight of it settle onto his chest like stones. because he knew even then that his daughter had inherited his need to heal, had inherited his calling, and he was terrified of where that calling might lead her. He closed the metal box and carried it back to the attic, put it away where Emma would not find it again, where he would not have to look at the physical evidence of his failures. But it was too late. The seed had been planted. Emma had seen the medals and heard the story and made her decision. She just did not know it yet. The choice that changed everything. May 2018, Columbus East High School. Graduation day arrived with the kind of perfect weather that made people believe in new beginnings. Blue sky, gentle breeze, the scent of cut grass and possibility hanging in the air like a promise. Emma Hayes sat among 400 of her classmates in white caps and gowns, waiting for her name to be called. She was 18 now, tall and athletic, with her father's serious eyes and her mother's quick smile. Valedictorian, captain of the track team, accepted to Yale with a full academic scholarship for pre-med. She should have been excited. This was supposed to be the beginning of everything she had worked for. Instead, she felt hollow, like she was about to walk down a path someone else had chosen for her. In the audience, Robert and Linda Hayes sat with the pride of parents who had done everything right, encouraged their daughter, supported her dreams, never pushed too hard, but always been there to catch her when she stumbled. They had raised a daughter who was going to be a doctor, who was going to save lives without ever having to see what war did to the young men who fought it. Robert did not know, sitting there applauding as Emma received her diploma, that he had already lost. That the decision had been made months ago in a recruiting office downtown, where Emma had signed papers that would change both their lives forever. The celebration dinner at the house was everything it should have been. Relatives crowded into the living room. Linda's famous lasagna. A cake with "Congratulations, Emma" written in blue frosting. Everyone talking about Yale and medical school and the bright future that stretched ahead like a highway with no exits. Emma smiled and thanked everyone and pretended she felt the excitement she was supposed to feel. But that night, alone in her room with the acceptance letter from Yale on her desk, she opened her laptop and looked at the email she had been avoiding. Subject: your Army enlistment contract. She had gone to the recruiting office 3 months ago, had walked in during a free period when she should have been studying for her advanced placement exams. The recruiter, a staff sergeant named Torres with kind eyes and 3 deployment patches on his uniform, had listened to her talk about wanting to serve, wanting to do something that mattered, wanting to follow in her father's footsteps. Combat medic, he had said. Healthcare specialist. 68 whiskey. That is what your dad was? In Vietnam, but he never talks about it. They never do, Torres had said. The ones who saw the worst of it. He had explained the training. 16 weeks at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. First 10 weeks basic combat training. Next 6 weeks learning to be a medic. Then advanced individual training before deployment. Possibly Afghanistan, possibly Iraq. Wherever they needed medics. I need to think about it, Emma had said. But she had already decided. Had decided when she was 10 years old and found her father's medals. Had decided every time she saw that faraway look in his eyes and wanted to understand what put it there. Had decided because she needed to know if trying was enough, even when you failed. Even when people died despite your best efforts. She signed the papers the next day. Delayed entry program, which meant she could still finish high school. Report for basic training in August. The recruiter had smiled and shaken her hand and thanked her for her service. Your dad is going to be proud, he had said. Emma had not been so sure. 3 weeks after graduation, she told them. Memorial Day weekend. The house quiet. Linda in the kitchen making dinner. Robert on the porch, reading the newspaper in the dying light. Emma sat down beside him, her stomach churning. Dad, I need to tell you something. He looked up from the paper, and she saw the wariness in his eyes. Parents always knew when something big was coming. When the words about to be spoken would change things in ways that could not be unchanged. I am not going to Yale, she said. Robert set down the newspaper carefully. Precise movements. The way you handle something when your hands want to shake, but you will not let them. What are you talking about? I enlisted. In the Army, I am going to be a combat medic. The words hung between them like a chasm. Robert's face went through a series of expressions too quick to name. Shock, disbelief, and then rising like a tide, anger. You did what? Linda appeared in the doorway, drawn by the tone of her husband's voice. She looked between them, and Emma saw the moment her mother understood. Tell me you are joking, Robert said. His voice was low, dangerous in its control. Tell me this is some kind of graduation prank. I'm serious, Dad. I signed the papers 3 months ago. I report to Fort Sam Houston in August. You are 18 years old. You do not know what you are doing. I am old enough to make this choice. You are old enough to ruin your life. Robert stood, his chair scraping against the porch boards. You have a full scholarship to Yale. You could be anything, do anything. Why would you throw that away? Because I want to serve like you did. The words hit Robert like a physical blow. His face went pale. You do not know anything about what I did. Then tell me. Emma stood too, matching his intensity. Tell me why you hide your medals in the attic. Tell me why you wake up at night. Tell me why you look so sad when you think nobody is watching. Linda stepped forward, hands raised in peace. Both of you, please. But Robert was not done. The dam had cracked, and decades of repressed emotion came flooding through. You want to know? Fine. I will tell you. I was 19 years old in a rice paddy in Vietnam when I had to choose between staying with one dying soldier and saving the rest of my squad. I chose to stay. I held that boy's hand while he died, and because I made that choice, 2 other men got killed. 2 men with families, with futures, with everything to live for. I got them killed because I wanted to be a hero. The words rang out in the twilight. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A car drove past. The world kept turning while Robert Hayes finally spoke the truth he had been carrying for 49 years. Emma stared at her father, at this man she thought she knew, seeing him clearly for the first time. Dad, she said softly, you did not get anyone killed. You gave that soldier dignity in his last moments. You showed him mercy. Mercy? Robert's laugh was bitter. Mercy got Chen and Brooks killed. Mercy is a luxury you cannot afford in war. Then what were you supposed to do? Leave him to die alone? Yes, that is exactly what I was supposed to do. That is what soldiers do. They make the hard choices. They save the many, not the one. But Dad, Emma's voice broke. What if the one matters too? Robert had no answer. How could he? That was the question that had haunted him for half a lifetime. The question that turned him into a man who hid his medals and could not talk about his war and woke up in cold sweats thinking about a boy named Tommy who died grateful that someone had stayed. Linda moved to her husband's side, taking his hand. Her touch seemed to drain the anger from him, leaving only exhaustion. Emma, she said, your father is scared. We both are. War changes people. It takes pieces of them. I know. But maybe I need to understand what it took from him. Maybe that is the only way to help him get it back. Robert looked at his daughter, at this young woman who thought she could heal in him by walking into the same hell he had barely escaped. And he saw with devastating clarity that nothing he said would change her mind. She had his stubbornness, his need to save people even when they did not want to be saved. If you do this, he said finally, his voice raw, you carry my burden too. You carry Tommy. You carry Chen. You carry Brooks. You carry every choice I made and every man I could not save. Is that really what you want? Emma met his eyes. Yes, because maybe then you will not have to carry them alone. The silence stretched. Then Robert turned and walked into the house. Emma heard his footsteps on the stairs, the sound of his bedroom door closing. Not slamming, just closing, like the end of a chapter. Linda stayed on the porch with her daughter. Give him time, she said. He will come around. What if he does not? He will, because he loves you, and because deep down he knows you are doing this for the right reasons. But Emma was not sure about that, was not sure if her reasons were right or selfish, was not sure if she was honoring her father's sacrifice or just desperate to understand it, was not sure if there was even a difference between the two. That night, alone in her room, Emma Googled combat medics killed in action. The results filled her screen. Names, faces, stories of young men and women who had run toward danger to save lives and pay the ultimate price. She read until dawn, and she did not change her mind. The Old Warrior's Wisdom, August 2018, Fort Sam Houston, San Antonio, Texas. The air in Texas hit Emma like a physical thing, humid and heavy, smelling of dust and determination. She stood in a line of recruits, head shaved down to stubble like everyone else, wearing camouflage that still smelled new. Around her, young men and women from every corner of America, farm kids and city kids, college graduates and high school dropouts, all of them here for different reasons, but united by one thing. They had volunteered to serve. Drill Sergeant Maria Vasquez prowled the line like a predator assessing prey. She was 45, built like a tank, and had done 3 tours in Iraq. Her voice could strip paint. "Listen up," Vasquez barked. "Some of you think you are here to save lives. You are wrong. You are here to learn how to save lives while people are trying to kill you. Big difference. You do not get that difference. You will not make it through week 2. Clear?" "Yes, Drill Sergeant," the chorus echoed across the parade ground. But Emma was not looking at Vasquez. Her attention had caught on another figure standing at the edge of the formation, older than the other instructors, broader, carrying himself with the kind of quiet authority that did not need to be shouted. Sergeant Major William Coleman, 52 years old and built like a man who had spent 30 years being exactly what the Army needed him to be. He wore the badge of a combat medic and enough ribbons on his chest to tell a story of decades spent running toward gunfire instead of away from it. After formation, as the recruits scattered to their assigned barracks, Emma found him waiting by her building. "Hayes," he said, not a question, a statement. "Yes, Sergeant Major." "Robert Hayes' daughter." Emma felt her stomach drop. "You knew my father?" "Served with him. Different time, different war. But I knew him." Coleman's face was unreadable. "He know you are here?" "Yes, Sergeant Major." "He happy about it?" "No, Sergeant Major." Coleman nodded as if this confirmed something he already suspected. "Your father was a good medic, saved a lot of lives in Vietnam. But he carried the weight of it wrong, spent 40 years thinking he failed when he did not." "How do you know that?" Emma asked before she could stop herself. Then quickly, "I am sorry, that was out of line." But Coleman did not reprimand her. Instead, he gestured to a bench outside the barracks. "Sit." They sat. The Texas sun beat down. Somewhere nearby, another drill sergeant was screaming at another group of recruits, the timeless soundtrack of basic training. "Your father wrote me a letter," Coleman said, "years ago, after I got out. We served together for a few months in '89, training mission before Gulf War. He was older than me then, already trying to forget Vietnam. But one night he got drunk and told me the story. About Tommy Kern, about the choice he made." Emma stayed quiet, letting him talk. "He thought he did wrong, thought he got men killed because he stayed with one soldier instead of moving with the squad, ate at him his whole life. So a few years back, he wrote me this letter asking if I thought he made the right call." "What did you tell him?" Coleman looked at her with eyes that had seen too much and somehow kept their humanity anyway. "I told him there is no right call. Not in war. Every choice has a cost. You stay with the one, maybe others die. You leave the one, you carry the weight of that abandoned soldier forever. Either way, you pay." "Then how do you know which choice to make?" "You do not. You make the choice you can live with, and you try to forgive yourself for the consequences." Coleman shifted on the bench. "Your father could not forgive himself. That is what broke him, not the choice itself." "He never wrote back to you," Emma said. It was not a question. "No, some wounds run too deep for letters." Coleman stood, his knees making the subtle sounds of a man who had jumped out of too many aircraft and marched too many miles. "I'm going to tell you something your father should have heard 50 years ago. Being a medic is not about saving everyone. It is about being present when someone needs you. Sometimes that means triage, sometimes it means mercy. You are going to have to learn the difference." "How?" "By failing, by succeeding, by making choices that will haunt you and choices that will save you, same as everyone else." He started to walk away, then paused. "One more thing. Your father asked me to watch over you. He sent me a letter 3 months ago after you enlisted. First time he wrote me in 30 years. That is how much he loves you and how scared he is." Emma felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not now." "I will do him proud, Sergeant Major." Coleman's expression softened fractionally. "I know you will. Question is whether he will recognize it when you do." Forged in fire. The next 10 weeks were a crucible. Emma learned to shoot, to march, to follow orders without hesitation. She learned to function on 4 hours of sleep and meals that tasted like cardboard. She learned that the human body could be pushed far beyond what the mind believed possible. But more importantly, she learned medicine under pressure. The combat trauma training course was designed to simulate the chaos of actual combat. Recruits rotated through scenarios with mannequins that bled realistic fake blood, that made sounds of pain, that could die if you made the wrong choice or took too long. Emma excelled. Her hands were steady, her mind clear under pressure. While other recruits panicked when faced with multiple casualties, she moved with methodical efficiency. assess, treat, move, assess, treat, move. Until the day she faced the choice. It was week 9. The scenario involved an IED strike on a convoy. Multiple casualties. Limited time before simulated enemy reinforcements arrived. Emma and 3 other medic trainees had to treat 5 casualties with varying degrees of injury. Casualty 1. Traumatic amputation below the knee, massive blood loss. Maybe 30% chance of survival even with immediate treatment. Casualty 2. Chest wound, difficulty breathing but conscious. 70% survival chance if treated within 3 minutes. Casualties 3, 4, and 5. Various wounds ranging from serious to minor. Standard triage protocol was clear. You treated casualty 2 first. Better odds. More lives saved overall. The math was simple. Emma knelt between casualty 1 and casualty 2. The mannequins stared at nothing with their painted eyes. The fake blood pooled. The speakers hidden in their chests played recordings of labored breathing, of pain. Hayes, Coleman's voice cut through the chaos. He was the scenario instructor, watching with the clinical detachment of a man who had seen this for real too many times to count. Who do you treat first? Emma's hands hovered between the 2 casualties. Her training screamed casualty 2. Her father's story whispered casualty 1. She chose casualty 1. Her hands flew through the motions. Tourniquet applied high and tight above the amputation, pressure dressing, IV line for fluid replacement. She worked with focused intensity, blocking out everything else. 90 seconds later, casualty 2 coded. The simulator flatlined. An instructor marked him as killed in action. Emma heard it, kept working, stabilized casualty 1, moved to casualty 3. When the scenario ended, Coleman called her into his office. The room was small, functional, decorated only with a few photographs of soldiers and a map of Iraq marked with the places Coleman had served. He sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, expression unreadable. You failed the scenario, he said flatly. Yes, Sergeant Major. Casualty 2 was savable. You let him die. Yes, Sergeant Major. Why? Emma met his eyes. Because Casualty 1 needed me more. Casualty 1 had a 30% survival chance. Casualty 2 had 70. You made the wrong choice by any objective measure. With respect, Sergeant Major, I do not think there is an objective measure for that kind of choice. Coleman leaned back in his chair. You are your father's daughter. That is going to make you a good medic or get you killed. I have not decided which yet. My father stayed with the dying soldier. I have spent my whole life watching that choice destroy him. I needed to know if it was the wrong choice. And I still do not know. But at least Casualty 1 did not die alone. For a long moment, Coleman said nothing. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out an envelope. Your father sent this. Asked me to give it to you before you deploy. I am giving it to you now instead. Emma took the envelope with shaking hands. Her father's handwriting, her name. Read it later, Coleman said. For now, you need to understand something. Your father made his choice and could not forgive himself. You just made the same choice. The question is whether you are strong enough to carry it differently than he did. I do not know if I am. Then you better figure it out before you get to Afghanistan, because over there, the consequences are real. The blood does not wash off and the dead do not get up when the scenario ends. Emma saluted and left. That night, in her bunk with a flashlight under her blanket like a child reading past bedtime, she opened her father's letter. The words were shaky, written by a man whose hands trembled with emotion. Emma, if you are reading this, you are about to deploy. Bull Coleman, the man who gave you this letter, is one of the best medics the Army ever produced. Listen to him, learn from him, but do not become him. Do not become me either. I need you to know something I should have told you before you left. The choice I made with Tommy Kern, I have always believed it was wrong. I stayed with 1 soldier and 2 others died. The math seems simple. 2 lives lost because I wanted to be a hero. Because I wanted to feel like I mattered in that boy's last moments. But your words that night on the porch have haunted me. What if the one matters too? I never had an answer. I still do not. Maybe there is no right answer. Maybe every medic who ever lived has had to face that impossible choice and lived with the weight of it forever. Maybe that is what makes us healers, the willingness to carry the burden of our choices. I do not want you to carry my burden too, but I know you well enough to know that you will anyway. You are stubborn like me, compassionate like your mother, strong in ways I never was. So I am going to ask you to do something I could never do. When you make your choice, when you face your Tommy Kern, whatever you decide, forgive yourself afterward. Understand that you did what you thought was right in that moment, that trying is enough, that mercy matters even when the mission suffers. Be better than I was. That is all I ask. I love you. I am proud of you. I am terrified for you. Come home safe. Dad. Emma read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and tucked it under her pillow. Somewhere in the barracks, another recruit was crying quietly into their blanket. Someone else was snoring, the normal sounds of young people far from home, preparing for war. But Emma felt for the first time since she had made this decision that maybe she was on the right path. Not because she had the answers, but because she was finally asking the right questions. Into the Valley, January 2019. Forward Operating Base Chapman, Coast Province, Afghanistan. The helicopter dropped through mountain air that felt thin as a promise. Emma pressed her face to the small window, watching Afghanistan unfold below her like a geography lesson come to hostile life. Brown mountains, valleys that looked peaceful from altitude but hid decades of war. A land where empires came to die. The FOB was a collection of temporary structures surrounded by concrete barriers and wire. Guard towers at each corner. The entire place had the feeling of something held together by stubbornness and prayer, which Emma would learn was exactly what it was. Sergeant Major Coleman was already there, having arrived 2 weeks earlier to set up the medical facility. He met her on the landing zone, the rotor wash whipping dust into clouds around them. "Welcome to paradise," he shouted over the noise. Emma grabbed her gear and followed him toward the medical building, a low structure of plywood and hope. Inside, it was surprisingly well equipped. Surgical lights, monitors, enough supplies to handle mass casualties if necessary, which, given the intelligence reports, was more likely than anyone wanted to admit. Dr. James Chen was organizing equipment when they entered. 40 years old, with the calm demeanor of a man who had seen enough trauma that nothing could rattle him anymore. 3 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan already, a trauma surgeon who could have made 3 times his military salary in a civilian hospital, but chose to be here instead. "Fresh meat," Chen said by way of greeting. Then seeing Emma's expression, he smiled. "Relax, we are all fresh meat to the mortars. Welcome to Chapman." The next week settled into a rhythm, mornings treating minor injuries, heat exhaustion, sprains, the occasional infection from wounds that soldiers did not report soon enough. Evenings maintaining equipment and going over mass casualty protocols that everyone hoped they would never need. Emma met the other soldiers who would become her world. Specialists, sergeants, men and women from every corner of America, all of them united by the fact that they had volunteered to be here when they could have been anywhere else. And she met Marcus Rivera. He was 19, fresh-faced, from a small town in Nebraska that Emma had never heard of. A communications specialist who had joined the Army to pay for college, specifically to study art. He carried a sketchbook everywhere, filling it with drawings of the mountains, the sky, the faces of his fellow soldiers captured in quiet moments. Marcus was assigned to work with the medical team for a week, learning basic combat lifesaver skills. He was earnest and nervous and asked questions about everything. He reminded Emma of herself a few months ago, before the training had scraped away some of her innocence. "My mom is a nurse," Marcus told her during a break, "works in hospice care. She taught me that everyone deserves dignity, especially at the end." He showed Emma photos on his phone. His mother, Lucia, a strong-looking woman with kind eyes, pictures of their house. His high school graduation, a life that seemed impossibly far away from this place of dust and danger. "She did not want me to join," Marcus said, "but I wanted to do something that mattered, something more than just myself." Emma understood that need to serve, that calling that some people felt and others did not. The thing that made you raise your hand and volunteer when staying home would have been so much easier. They became friends in the casual way soldiers do. Not deep, not complicated. Just 2 young people far from home, finding comfort in shared experience. 3 weeks into Emma's deployment, Coleman pulled her aside after morning rounds. "Intelligence briefing this afternoon. Command wants all medical personnel present." That sounds ominous, because it is. The briefing was held in the operations center. Maps on the walls showing Taliban movement patterns. Charts tracking attacks on coalition forces. A picture emerging of an enemy that was organized, patient, and planning something big. Captain David Brooks, the FOB commander, led the briefing, He was 42, on his fourth deployment, and had the look of a man who had stopped being surprised by anything years ago. Signals intelligence suggests a major Taliban offensive in the next 48 to 72 hours, Brooks said, pointing to the maps. We are talking coordinated assault on the base, multiple breach points, likely followed by infiltration teams targeting key facilities. He paused, letting that sink in. The medical facility is a likely target. So is communications. They know if they can knock out our ability to call for support and treat casualties, they can take this base. Emma felt her stomach tighten. This was not training, not scenarios with mannequins and fake blood. This was real. People were going to get hurt. People were going to die. And she was going to have to make choices that would follow her for the rest of her life. After the briefing, Coleman found her on the walk back to medical. You ready for this, he asked. No. Good. The ones who think they are ready are the ones who panic first. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Emma asked the question that had been burning in her mind since she read her father's letter. What choice would you make if you had to pick between saving one soldier who was dying and saving others who might die? Coleman stopped walking. I would make the choice that let me sleep at night, and then I would spend the rest of my life wondering if it was the right one. That is not an answer. It is the only answer there is. That night, Emma could not sleep. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, thinking about choices and consequences. About her father in a rice paddy 50 years ago. About Coleman making his own impossible decisions. About all the medics throughout history who had faced this same dilemma. She thought about Marcus with his sketchbook and his dreams of teaching art to children. About Dr. Chen, who could be safely in America but chose to be here. About all the soldiers who trusted that if they fell, someone would come for them. And she thought about tomorrow, about the attack that was coming, about the moment when theory would become practice and all her training would either save lives or fail to. Emma finally drifted off near dawn, her father's letter clutched in her hand. The day the sky fell, April 29, 2019. The morning started normal, too normal. The kind of normal that made soldiers nervous because nothing in Afghanistan stayed normal for long. Emma was in the medical facility, organizing supplies with Marcus helping. He had volunteered to assist for the day, saying he wanted to learn more about emergency medicine. Really, Emma suspected, he was nervous about the intelligence briefing and wanted to be around people who might be able to save him if things went wrong. They talked while they worked. Marcus showed her his latest sketch, a portrait of Dr. Chen performing surgery. The detail was incredible. Chen's face captured in a moment of intense concentration. You are really talented, Emma said. Thanks. I figure if I make it home, I want to teach art to kids in rural schools, places like where I grew up. Show them that beauty exists even in small towns. You will make it home, Emma said with more confidence than she felt. I hope so. Mom's been sick. Cancer. She did not tell me until after I deployed. Did not want me to worry. Emma felt a chill. Here was Marcus's Tommy Kern, the person he needed to get home to, the reason his life mattered beyond just himself. Then we will make sure you get home, she said. It was exactly 2 in the afternoon when the alarm sirens began to wail. The sound cut through the normal noise of the base like a knife. Everyone knew what it meant. Incoming, rockets or mortars or both. Every soldier had drilled for this moment hundreds of times. Run for the bunkers, take cover, wait for the all clear. Emma grabbed her medical bag. Protocol said she should head for the bunker. But protocol also said medics needed to be ready to move the moment casualties started coming in. She was halfway to the bunker when the first explosion hit. The motor pool erupted in a ball of fire and smoke. The shock wave hit her like a physical blow, nearly knocking her off her feet. Her ears rang. The world tilted. And then she saw him. Marcus was on the ground near the communications building, 50 yards away. He had been running for cover when the shrapnel from the explosion caught him. Even from this distance, Emma could see the blood spreading across his uniform. Time slowed. Everything narrowed to a single point of focus. Behind her, the bunker, safety, protocol, the mission. Ahead of her, Marcus, bleeding, dying, the one. Emma heard Coleman's voice in her head. You make the choice you can live with. She heard her father's voice. I stayed with Tommy because he needed me. She heard her own voice from 3 months ago in a training scenario. At least casualty 1 did not die alone. The mathematics played out in her head in an instant. If she ran to Marcus, she would be exposed. More explosions were coming. She could hear them, the whistle of incoming artillery getting closer. But if she went to the bunker, Marcus would die alone. would bleed out in the dust wondering why nobody came. Emma had 1 second to choose between mercy and mission. She ran toward Marcus. "Hayes, no!" Coleman's voice behind her, but she was already gone. Explosions bracketed her path, dirt and smoke and the smell of things burning. 50 yards had never seemed so long. Emma's boots pounded the ground. Her medical bag bounced against her hip. Her heart hammered in her chest. She reached Marcus and dropped to her knees beside him. The damage was bad. Shrapnel had torn through his thigh, likely hitting the femoral artery. More shrapnel in his shoulder. He was conscious but going into shock, his eyes wide and glassy. "Emma," he gasped. "Emma, I cannot feel my leg." "That is the body's way of protecting you," she said, her hands already moving with practiced efficiency. "You are going to be okay, Marcus. Stay with me." She applied a tourniquet high on his thigh, tightened it until the bleeding slowed, started an IV line for fluid replacement. Her training took over, pushing fear aside. This was what she had been made for. This moment. Around them, the attack continued. More explosions, small arms fire from the perimeter, radio chatter filling the air with urgent voices calling for support, for ammunition, for help. And then Emma heard something that made her blood freeze. Footsteps. Multiple people, running toward their position. She looked up. 3 men rounded this corner of the communications building. Taliban fighters, armed, moving with purpose. They saw Emma and Marcus immediately. For one frozen moment, their eyes met across 30 feet of dust and war. Emma positioned herself over Marcus completely, shielding him with her body. Not a choice. Not really. Just an instinct as old as humanity. Protect the wounded, even if it costs everything. The lead fighter raised his rifle, and Emma Hayes understood with perfect clarity that she was about to become her father's story. She was about to make the choice that would define her. The choice between mission and mercy. Between leaving Marcus to die alone or staying with him and paying the price. She chose mercy. Emma looked the fighter in the eyes and did not move. Her hand stayed pressed against Marcus's tourniquet. Her body stayed between him and the rifles pointed at them both. She thought about her father, about Tommy Kern, about choices and consequences and the weight that medics carry. She thought about Marcus's mother back in Nebraska, waiting for her son to come home, about his dreams of teaching art to children, about all the lives he might touch if he survived. And she thought about her own father, 50 years ago in a rice paddy, making this same choice, living with it every day since, never forgiving himself. Emma had one last thought before everything changed. At least Dad will understand. Then the fighter lowered his rifle and drew a knife instead. And Emma Hayes learned what it meant to be a medic in the place where mercy and mission collide. The knife caught the Afghan sun as the fighter raised it. Steel forged in some workshop thousands of miles away, now carried across mountains to this moment. This choice, this collision of 2 people who, in another world, might never have met. Emma Hayes saw the blade and understood with perfect clarity what was about to happen. She had perhaps 3 seconds to change her mind. 3 seconds to roll away from Marcus and run for cover. 3 seconds to choose mission over mercy. Her father's voice whispered in her memory. "I stayed with Tommy and 2 other men died." But another voice answered. Her own voice, from that night on the porch in Columbus. What if the one matters too? Emma pressed her hand more firmly against Marcus's tourniquet and did not move. The fighter's name was Zahir, 22 years old, from a village in Paktia province where his family had grown wheat for 3 generations until an American drone strike killed his father during a wedding celebration 2 years ago. The military called it collateral damage. Zahir called it murder. He had joined the Taliban not because he believed in their vision of the world, but because they were the only ones offering him a chance at revenge. But revenge was supposed to be simple. Americans were supposed to be faceless monsters. Easy to hate, easy to kill. This American had a face, young, female, wearing the Red Cross armband of a medic, covering a wounded soldier with her own body instead of saving herself. And her eyes, meeting his across the space between them, held no hatred, only determination, and something else, something that looked like peace, as if she had already made her choice and accepted the cost. Zahir hesitated. His companion, an older fighter named Habib, did not. Habib was 40, a true believer. He had been fighting Americans since the invasion in 2001, had seen his village burned, his brothers killed, his world destroyed by men who claimed they were bringing freedom. Habib understood war in its purest form. There were enemies. You killed them. Questions were for people who had never watched their families die. He shoved Zahir aside and moved toward Emma with the blade raised. "Wait," Zahir said in Pashto. "She is a doctor. Geneva Convention." "Geneva Convention," Habib spat. "You think Americans care about conventions? They bomb weddings. They kill children. This is war. There is no mercy." Emma did not understand the words, but she understood the tone, understood the shift in body language as the older fighter took charge. She had maybe 2 seconds left. Marcus stirred beneath her, semi-conscious, trying to speak. Run." "Shh," she whispered. "Close your eyes." The first strike came without warning. Habib lunged forward, the blade aimed at Marcus's exposed chest. Emma shifted her weight, taking the knife deep into her right side, just below her ribs. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, like being hit with a hammer made of fire. Emma gasped but did not scream, would not scream, would not let Marcus know how bad it was. The blade had penetrated her liver. She knew it immediately from the location and the specific quality of the pain. Liver lacerations were dangerous, fatal if not treated quickly. But Emma's hands did not move from Marcus's tourniquet. Her body did not move from its protective position over him. Habib pulled the knife out. Blood flowed hot down Emma's side, soaking into her uniform. Her vision blurred for a moment, then cleared with the adrenaline surge that was her body's last gift. The ability to function through trauma that should incapacitate. She had been trained for this, not for being stabbed specifically, but for managing severe pain while maintaining medical care, for pushing through when every instinct screamed to stop. Emma thought about her father, about the choice he made and the weight he carried. She thought about Coleman's words, "You make the choice you can live with." She could live with this, dying to save Marcus. That was a choice she could carry into whatever came next. The second strike hit her left shoulder blade. The knife scraped bone, sending jolts of agony down her arm. Emma bit her lip hard enough to draw blood, tasted copper. Her left arm weakened but did not drop away from Marcus. Beneath her, Marcus was crying. He understood now what was happening, understood that his medic, his friend, was taking blows meant for him. He tried to push her off, tried to tell her to save herself, but his body would not obey. The blood loss and shock had stolen his strength. "Stay still," Emma managed to say. Her voice was strained but steady. "You are going to be okay." The third fighter, the younger one who had hesitated, stood frozen. Zahir watched this American woman take knife strikes that were meant to kill her patient, watched her refuse to abandon him even as her blood pooled on the ground. He had been told Americans did not value life, did not understand sacrifice, that they were cowards who relied on technology because they lacked courage. But this woman was the bravest person he had ever seen. "Habib, stop," Zahir said. "This is wrong." "This is war," Habib replied and struck again. The third wound hit Emma's upper back, puncturing her right lung. She felt the knife go in, felt the strange sensation of air escaping into places it should not be. Pneumothorax, collapsed lung. Her breathing became labored. Each breath took conscious effort. Emma's medical training cataloged the injuries even as she sustained them. Right flank, probable liver laceration, severe hemorrhaging. Left shoulder, muscle damage, reduced arm mobility. Upper back, pneumothorax, respiratory compromise imminent. She was dying. She knew it with clinical certainty. Maybe 5 minutes of consciousness left before shock and blood loss took her under. Maybe less. But Marcus was still alive beneath her, still breathing. His tourniquet was still in place. If help came in the next few minutes, he would survive. That was enough. The fourth strike caught her left arm as she tried to shield Marcus's face from the attack. The blade went deep into the bicep, cutting muscle nearly to the bone. Her left arm went completely limp, dropping to her side. Emma heard gunfire getting closer. American voices. The base was responding to the attack, pushing back against the infiltrators. Help was coming. She just needed to hold on a little longer. Through the haze of pain, Emma thought about her mother, about Linda Hayes, who would get a knock on the door and be told her daughter died in Afghanistan. Who would blame herself for not fighting harder to keep Emma home? Who would hold Robert while he broke apart, believing his daughter had inherited his curse? Emma wanted to tell them she was not cursed, that this choice felt right in a way nothing else in her short life ever had, that she finally understood what her father had been trying to tell her all along, that mercy was not weakness, that staying was not failure, that sometimes the math did not matter because love could not be calculated. The fifth wound was the worst yet. Habib drove the blade into Emma's lower back, twisting it before pulling it out. The knife damaged her spinal cord at the lumbar level. Emma felt her legs go numb instantly, felt the connection between brain and limbs sever like a cut wire. She understood what this meant. Even if she survived, she would never walk again, never run, never stand under her own power. Everything below her waist was gone forever. For the first time since the attack began, Emma felt fear. Not fear of dying, fear of living, fear of being less than whole, fear of being a burden, fear that her choice to save Marcus had cost her more than she was prepared to pay. But Marcus was still breathing, and that still mattered. The sixth strike targeted her neck, but Emma managed to move slightly at the last second. The blade sliced across her right shoulder instead, missing the carotid artery by centimeters. Blood sprayed. Emma's vision darkened around the edges. Her body was shutting down, beginning the process of dying. She could feel her consciousness slipping away, could feel the cold creeping in from her extremities. This was what bleeding out felt like. This was what every casualty she had ever treated had experienced. Now she understood it from the inside. Emma thought about Tommy Kern, about the boy her father had stayed with in a rice paddy 50 years ago. She wondered if Tommy had felt this same strange peace, this acceptance, this understanding that death was not the worst thing. Being abandoned was worse. Dying alone was worse. At least Marcus would not die alone. The seventh and final strike drove through Emma's chest between her ribs, missing her heart by 2 inches, but puncturing the right ventricle slightly. Blood began filling the pericardial sac, creating pressure that would stop her heart within minutes. Cardiac tamponade, fatal without immediate surgical intervention. Emma coughed and blood filled her mouth. She tried to speak, to tell Marcus something important, but the words would not come. Her body had nothing left. She had reached the limit of what human physiology could endure. She thought about her father's letter, the words he had written in his shaking hand, "Be better than I was." Emma hoped she had been. Hoped that somewhere Robert Hayes would understand that his daughter had not failed, that she had carried his burden and found it lighter than he had always believed. That mercy was not a mistake. That staying was not weakness. That love, in the end, was worth any price. Habib and his companions stepped back, satisfied that both Americans would soon be dead. They moved toward other targets, disappearing into the chaos of the ongoing attack. Zahir lingered for a moment, looking at Emma's broken body still draped protectively over the wounded soldier. He had never seen anything like this, never imagined an enemy capable of such sacrifice. He walked away troubled, questioning everything he had been told about the people he was supposed to hate. Emma remained conscious for another 30 seconds. 30 seconds of pain so intense it transcended description. 30 seconds of understanding that this was the end. 30 seconds of hoping it had been enough. Her hand, still pressed against Marcus's tourniquet, was slick with her own blood now. But the pressure had not wavered. Even dying, she maintained her care. Marcus, barely conscious himself, turned his head slightly and saw Emma's face. Saw the blood. Saw the wounds covering her back. Understood what she had done, what she had sacrificed. "Why?" he whispered. "I am not worth this." Emma's lips moved. He had to lean close to hear the words, barely more than a breath. "Everyone is worth this." Then her eyes closed and her breathing stopped. Sergeant Major William Coleman was fighting his way through the base toward the communications building. He had heard Emma's last radio transmission before she cut him off, had known with the certainty of 30 years of combat experience that she was about to do something brave and stupid. He had tried to reach her position immediately, but the attack was too well coordinated. Taliban fighters had breached the perimeter at multiple points. Coleman and Dr. Chen were pinned down at the medical facility, treating wounded while trying to stay alive themselves. But Coleman had not spent 3 decades as a combat medic to let one of his soldiers die alone. "Chen," he said, between returning fire at an enemy position, "I am going after Hayes." "We have 8 casualties here who need treatment," Chen replied. His hands were bloody to the wrists, moving with practiced efficiency through a chest tube insertion on a soldier who had been hit by shrapnel. "You can handle them. Bull, if you leave now, you might not make it back, and we need you here." Coleman looked at the casualties, looked at Chen, looked in the direction of the communications building where Emma was. He was facing his own version of the choice. Stay and treat the many, or go and save the one. For 30 years, Coleman had chosen mission over mercy. had made the hard calls, had let men die because others had better odds, had carried the weight of those decisions with the stoic acceptance of a professional soldier. But Emma Hayes was Robert Hayes' daughter, and Coleman had promised her father he would watch over her. More than that, she was a medic who had run toward danger to save a wounded soldier. She embodied everything Coleman had spent his career trying to teach. He could not let her die alone. "I am going," Coleman said. It was not a debate. Chen nodded. "Understood." Some choices transcended logic. "Then go fast and come back alive." Coleman grabbed his rifle and moved. The base was chaos, smoke and gunfire, soldiers running to defensive positions, Taliban fighters trying to exploit breaches in the perimeter. The kind of coordinated assault that American forces had not faced in Afghanistan in years. Coleman moved with the efficiency of a man who had done this too many times to count. Cover to cover, weapon up, eyes scanning for threats. He was 52 years old and his knees complained and his back ached. But none of that mattered. Emma was out there, and she was his responsibility. He reached the communications building and rounded the corner. What he saw stopped him cold. Emma was lying across Marcus Rivera, her back a mass of blood and wounds. She was not moving. Marcus was conscious but barely, crying and trying to reach toward Emma. For a moment, Coleman saw a different scene, a different war, a rice paddy in Vietnam where a young Robert Hayes knelt beside a dying soldier named Tommy Kern, the circle completing itself across 50 years. Then training kicked in. Coleman was beside them in seconds, his hands already assessing. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "Chen, I need you here, now." He reached for Emma's neck, checking for a pulse. Found nothing. Her skin was cold, her lips blue, 7 stab wounds visible on her back and side, massive blood loss, no pulse, no respiration. Emma Hayes was dead. Coleman had seen enough death to recognize it. But he had also seen enough miracles to know that sometimes dead was not quite dead, that sometimes you could pull someone back from the edge if you acted fast enough. He rolled Emma into her back, mindful of the spinal injury he suspected from the angle of one of the wounds, started chest compressions, hard and fast, breaking ribs if necessary, forcing blood to a brain that had been without oxygen for too long. "Come on, Hayes," he said through gritted teeth. "You do not get to die on me. Not after making the same choice your father made. Not after being this brave." Marcus was saying something, crying, but Coleman blocked it out. All his focus was on Emma, on bringing her back. Dr. Chen arrived with 2 other medics, carrying equipment. He took one look at the situation and his face went grim. "How long?" Chen asked. 60 seconds without pulse, maybe 90. Chen nodded. Not good, but not impossible. They had maybe 2 more minutes before brain damage became irreversible. Maybe. They worked with the synchronized efficiency of a team that had trained together for months. Chen took over chest compressions, while Coleman inserted an IV for emergency drugs. One of the medics prepared an emergency airway. The other applied pressure bandages to the worst of the bleeding. "Epi," Chen said. Coleman injected epinephrine directly into the IV line, the drug that could restart a heart or do nothing at all, depending on whether there was any heart left to restart. 15 seconds, nothing. 30 seconds, nothing. Coleman looked at Emma's face, at this young woman who reminded him so much of her father, who had come to Afghanistan believing she could heal people, who had made the hardest choice any medic ever faced and paid for it with everything. He thought about the letter Robert Hayes had sent him. "Take care of my daughter. She is all I have." Coleman had failed. Emma was gone, and Robert would never forgive him. More importantly, Coleman would never forgive himself. "Again," he said, preparing another dose of epinephrine. "Bull," Chen said gently. "She has been down too long." "I said again." Chen did not argue, just resumed compressions while Coleman injected the second dose. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Then Emma gasped. It was a small sound, barely audible over the continued fighting elsewhere on the base. But it was the most beautiful sound Coleman had ever heard. Her heart restarted, weak, irregular, but beating. "We have her," Chen said. "Let us keep her." They moved with renewed urgency. Emergency transfusion to replace the massive blood loss. Chest tube insertion to reinflate the collapsed lung. Pressure dressings on all 7 stab wounds. Every intervention done in the field under fire, with limited equipment and no guarantee of success. But Emma's heart kept beating, kept pushing blood through a body that should have been dead, kept fighting. Marcus, still conscious, watched them work. Tears streamed down his face. "Is she going to make it?" he asked. "She is alive," Coleman said. It was not an answer to the question Marcus asked, but it was the only honest answer he could give. A medevac helicopter landed on the base 10 minutes later. By then, Coleman had stabilized both Emma and Marcus enough for transport. Barely. They loaded the casualties onto stretchers. As they carried Emma to the helicopter, Coleman held her hand. It was small and cold and covered in blood, but he felt a pulse in her wrist. Weak but present. "You did good, Hayes," he said, knowing she could not hear him. "Your father is going to be so proud of you, and so scared, but mostly proud." The helicopter lifted off into the Afghan sky. Coleman watched it go, his hands covered in Emma's blood, his heart heavy with the knowledge that she had survived the wounds but might never survive the consequences. He thought about Robert Hayes, about the choice Robert made 50 years ago and the guilt he carried every day since. About the letter Robert had sent, asking Coleman to teach his daughter to make better choices. But Emma had not made a better choice. She had made the exact same choice. The mercy choice. The one that valued the individual over the mission. The choice that said some things mattered more than mathematics. Coleman understood now what he should have told Robert years ago. It was not a better choice or a worse choice. It was the only choice a true medic could make. The choice to value every life, even when the odds said you should not. The choice to be human in the middle of war. Bagram Airfield Hospital, 3 days later. Emma woke to white ceiling tiles and the rhythmic beep of medical monitors. For a moment, she did not know where she was. Did not remember what had happened. Her mind was blank, wiped clean by trauma and drugs. Then the pain hit. It started in her back and radiated outward like ripples on water. Sharp pain in her side where the first knife had penetrated. Dull ache in her shoulder. Pressure in her chest. And below her waist, nothing. Absolute absence of sensation. Emma tried to move her legs, sent the signal from brain to muscle, waited for the response that did not come. She understood before anyone told her. The numbness, the complete lack of feeling, spinal cord injury, paralysis. Her legs were gone, not physically but functionally. She would never walk again, never run, never stand. The choice she made to save Marcus had cost her the ability to move through the world the way she always had. Emma wanted to cry, but the tears would not come. She felt hollow, empty, like someone had scooped out everything inside her and left only the shell. "Welcome back, Corporal Hayes." Dr. Chen sat beside her bed, his face drawn with exhaustion. He had been with her for all 3 days, through 2 emergency surgeries and multiple blood transfusions. He looked like he had aged a decade. "Marcus," Emma managed to say. Her throat was raw from the breathing tube. "Alive. Walking already, actually. You saved his life. The tourniquet you applied prevented him from bleeding out. He is going to make a full recovery." Emma closed her eyes, at least that. At least Marcus was okay. "You have been through multiple surgeries," Chen continued. His voice was gentle, professional. The voice of a doctor delivering news that would change a life forever. 7 stab wounds. We repaired your liver, reinflated your lung, patched your heart. But the wound to your lower back damaged your spinal cord at the L1 level. The paralysis is permanent. You will not regain function below your waist. The words should have devastated her, should have broken her. But Emma felt oddly calm. She had known the cost when she made the choice, had accepted it in those seconds before the first knife struck. "I would do it again," she said. Chen smiled sadly. "I know, that is what makes you a good medic, and what makes this so hard." Emma turned her head to look at him. "Does my father know?" "We notified your family that you were wounded, but we did not give details. The Army will do formal notification once you are stable enough to talk to them yourself." "How long until I can call home?" "We can try today if you are up for it." Emma was not sure she was up for it, was not sure she could face her father's voice, could not face telling him that she had made his choice and paid his price, that she had inherited his burden. But she owed him the truth, owed him the chance to understand what had happened and why. "Okay," she said, "let me talk to them." The video call connected with the time lag that marked international communications. The screen flickered, then resolved into her parents' living room in Columbus. Robert and Linda Hayes sat together on their couch, holding hands. They looked older than Emma remembered. Her father's face was drawn, his eyes red-rimmed. Her mother looked like she had been crying for days. They saw Emma on their screen and relief flooded their faces. Then they saw the hospital room, the monitors, the bandages visible on Emma's shoulder, and the relief mixed with fear. "Baby girl," Robert said, his voice cracked. "Hi, Dad. Hi, Mom." "Are you okay?" Linda asked. A mother's question, the one that demanded truth even when truth was painful. "I'm alive," Emma said. It was the same non-answer Coleman had given Marcus, the only honest response. "The army said you were wounded in action," Robert said, "but they would not tell us how bad. Seeing you now—" He trailed off, unable to finish. Emma took a breath, felt the pain in her ribs, felt the absence below her waist. "Dad, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting. Can you do that?" Robert nodded. His face had gone very pale. Emma told them about the attack, about finding Marcus wounded, about the choice she made to run to him instead of seeking cover, about the 3 Taliban fighters, about the knife. She told them about all 7 wounds, about feeling her legs go numb, about bleeding out while maintaining pressure on Marcus's tourniquet, about making the choice her father had made 50 years ago. When she finished, the silence on the other end of the call stretched for a long moment. Then Robert Hayes, combat medic from Vietnam, began to cry. They were not quiet tears. They were the sobs of a man who had held his grief inside for 50 years and could not contain it anymore. Linda held him, her own tears flowing, but let him break. "Emma," Robert finally managed to say, "you did not just save Marcus, you saved me." "What do you mean?" "I have spent 50 years believing I made the wrong choice with Tommy. 50 years thinking I was selfish, thinking I got men killed because I wanted to be a hero. But watching you—" He had to stop, overcome with emotion. Linda spoke for him. "Your father has been carrying guilt for so long, believing that staying with one soldier instead of saving many was wrong. But seeing you make the same choice for the same reasons, seeing your courage, it helped him understand something." "What?" Emma asked. Robert composed himself enough to speak. "That mercy is not weakness. That choosing to give one person dignity in their worst moment is not selfish. That we are medics because we believe every life matters, not just the ones the math says we should save." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "You made my choice, Emma, and you did it knowing the cost. That takes more courage than I ever had. Because I made my choice and spent 50 years regretting it, but you made yours and you are at peace with it. That is what I could never do. That is what you taught me." Emma felt her own tears finally come. Not tears of pain or regret, tears of understanding, of connection, of knowing that she and her father were finally speaking the same language after 18 years of miscommunication. "I cannot walk anymore, Dad," she said. "The spinal damage is permanent. I will be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life." "I know, and I am sorry, but Emma, you are still you. Your legs do not define who you are. Your choice does. Your courage does. Your willingness to put someone else's life above your own does." He leaned closer to the camera. "I am proud of you. More proud than I have ever been of anything in my life. You are a better person than I could ever be, and you are going to do great things even if you never walk again." "How can you say that? I am broken." "No," Robert said firmly, "you are whole, more whole than I have been in 50 years. Because you understand something I am only now learning. That making the hard choice is not the same as making the wrong choice. That trying is enough. That mercy matters." Linda spoke through her own tears. "We love you, Emma. We are coming to get you as soon as the army allows it. We will bring you home, and we will figure out what comes next together." "Mom, I do not know how to be this person, how to live without my legs." "You will learn the same way you learned everything else, with courage and determination and the support of people who love you." They talked for another hour about Marcus and his recovery, about Coleman and the rescue, about the surgeries and the prognosis and the long road of rehabilitation ahead. But mostly they talked about choices and consequences and the weight that medics carry. And for the first time in his life, Robert Hayes talked about Tommy Kern without shame. He told Emma about the boy from Pennsylvania who died holding his hand, about the choice he made and the men who died because of it, about the guilt that had poisoned him for half a century. He told her about the letter he had written to Coleman years ago, asking if he had done right or wrong, about Coleman's response that there was no right answer, about finally understanding that truth. "I forgive myself," Robert said. His voice was steady now, clear. "For the first time in 50 years, I forgive myself. Because if what you did was right, then what I did was right too. We both chose mercy when mission said we should not. And that makes us human. Not failed soldiers, Not broken medics, just human. Emma smiled through her tears. I love you, Dad. I love you too, baby girl, and I am coming to get you. We are going to bring you home. After the call ended, Emma lay in her hospital bed and stared at the ceiling. She thought about the path that had led her here, about finding her father's medals when she was 10, about enlisting against his wishes, about the training and the deployment and the moment when everything changed. She thought about Marcus, alive because she had chosen to stay, about his mother in Nebraska who would see her son again, about all the people Marcus would touch in his life, all the ripples spreading outward from one moment of mercy. She thought about her father, finally freed from guilt that had imprisoned him for 50 years, finally able to forgive himself because his daughter had shown him that his choice was not failure. And she thought about herself, about the woman she had been and the woman she would become, about learning to live in a wheelchair, about finding new ways to serve, about carrying the weight of her choice without letting it break her. Emma Hayes was 24 years old and paralyzed from the waist down. She would never again walk through a hospital, never again run to a casualty, never again stand under her own power. But she was not broken. She was transformed, forged in the crucible of war into something stronger than she had been before. She had made the choice between mercy and mission, between the one and the many, between mathematics and humanity. And she had chosen mercy. 7 wounds had marked her body, but they had healed her father's soul, had saved Marcus's life, had taught her the lesson she came to Afghanistan to learn. That trying was enough, that every life mattered, that love could not be calculated, that sometimes the one was worth the many. Emma closed her eyes and let exhaustion take her. Tomorrow she would begin the work of learning to live in her new body, of building a new future, of finding new ways to heal. But tonight, she let herself rest, let herself be at peace with the choice she had made and the price she had paid, because she would do it again, would make the same choice, would take the same 7 wounds, for Marcus, for her father, for every medic who had ever faced the impossible decision and chosen love over logic. She would do it all again. In Columbus, Ohio, Robert Hayes sat alone in his study long after Linda had gone to bed. In front of him, spread on his desk, were his medals from Vietnam, the ones he had hidden in the attic for 40 years, the ones that represented the man he had been and the choices he had made. He picked up Tommy Kern's dog tags, the ones he had carried every day for 50 years, the ones that had reminded him of his failure. But tonight they felt different, lighter. They were no longer symbols of guilt. They were symbols of mercy, of a choice to value one life even when the cost was high, of staying when leaving would have been easier. Robert had spent half a century believing he was weak, believing he had failed, believing that his choice to stay with Tommy had been selfish and wrong. But his daughter, his brave daughter, had shown him the truth. He had not failed Tommy. He had given that boy dignity in his last moments, had made sure he did not die alone, had chosen humanity over mathematics. And if Emma's choice was right, then so was his. Robert opened his desk drawer and pulled out a piece of paper. He began to write. Dear Colonel Mitchell, it has been 50 years since that day in the rice paddy. 50 years since I stayed with Tommy Kern while you moved the squad to safety. 50 years since 2 good men died, and I believed it was my fault. I need you to know that I finally understand. You were right to be angry with me that day. I disobeyed orders. I put one life above the mission. By the mathematics of war, I made the wrong choice. But there is another mathematics, one that cannot be calculated in lives saved versus lives lost. It is the mathematics of mercy, of dignity, of refusing to let someone die alone. My daughter just made the same choice I made. She took 7 knife wounds protecting a soldier she could have abandoned. She lost the use of her legs, but she saved that soldier's life, and in doing so, she saved me. She showed me that I was not wrong all those years ago. Neither were you. We both made the choices we could live with. You chose mission, I chose mercy. The war needed both kinds of men. I forgive you for being angry with me, and I hope you can forgive me for the men we lost that day. But most of all, I forgive myself. Thank you for teaching me to be a medic. Thank you for being a good commander. And thank you for being willing to write that letter 30 years ago, even though I never had the courage to respond until now. I am ready to finally put Tommy's tags to rest, not to forget him, but to remember him with gratitude instead of guilt. Respectfully, Robert Hayes, Specialist, U.S. Army Combat Medic, Vietnam, 1969 to 1970. He sealed the letter and addressed it. Tomorrow he would mail it. Tomorrow he would begin the process of healing that should have started 50 years ago. But tonight, he simply sat with his medals and his memories and his newfound peace. His daughter had gone to war, had faced the same choice he faced, had paid a terrible price. But she had also given him the greatest gift, the gift of understanding, the gift of forgiveness, the gift of knowing that mercy was not weakness, that staying was not failure, that choosing love over logic was the bravest thing any person could do. Robert Hayes placed Tommy Kern's dog tags back in their case, but this time he did not hide them in the attic. He placed them on his desk where he could see them every day, where they would remind him not of failure, but of the day he chose to be human in the middle of hell. And that was enough. That had always been enough. Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, Bethesda, Maryland, June 2019. The rehabilitation wing smelled of disinfectant and determination. Emma Hayes had been transferred from Germany 2 weeks ago, stable enough for the long flight, but still fragile in ways that had nothing to do with her body. The physical wounds were healing, 7 scars that would mark her forever, but healing. The wound to her soul was another matter. She sat in her wheelchair by the window of her room, looking out at a world she could no longer walk through. Physical therapy started tomorrow. Today was supposed to be rest, but Emma could not rest, could not stop thinking about the choice she made and the price she paid. Her legs, visible beneath the hospital gown, looked the same as they always had. Same shape, same skin. But they were strangers now, pieces of her body that no longer answered to her will. She had tried in private moments to move them, had sent the signal from brain to muscle with all the intensity she could muster. Nothing, just a terrible absence of response. Emma understood paralysis clinically, understood that the spinal cord injury at L1 had severed the communication pathway between her brain and everything below. Understood that no amount of willing it would make the connection regenerate. But understanding did not make acceptance any easier. She thought about running, about the track team in high school, about the physical fitness tests and basic training, about moving through the world with the easy confidence of someone who never questioned whether their body would obey. All of that was gone. She would spend the rest of her life dependent on a chair with wheels, dependent on others for things she used to do without thinking. The depression settled over her like a weight. Not the dramatic sadness of movies, but a gray numbness, a sense that the future she had imagined no longer existed, that she had traded her mobility for Marcus's life and now had to figure out how to live with that trade. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she said, not turning from the window. Sergeant Major William Coleman entered, carrying a folder and wearing civilian clothes. He looked different out of uniform, older somehow, more human. "Hayes," he said. "Sergeant Major." Emma finally turned to face him. "I did not expect to see you here. I'm on leave, came to check on you." He sat in the chair beside her wheelchair, placing the folder on the bed. "How are you doing?" It was a simple question, one that people had been asking her constantly. "How are you doing, Emma?" The answer they wanted was fine or better or hanging in there. The answer that would let them feel good about asking. Emma gave him the truth instead. I'm not doing well, Sergeant Major. I cannot walk. I will never deploy again. I will never be a medic in the field. Everything I trained for, everything I wanted to be, is gone, and I am trying to figure out what is left." Coleman nodded, did not offer platitudes, did not tell her it would get better or that things happen for a reason. He just sat with her pain for a moment, the way a good medic sits with a patient who is hurting. "You saved Marcus Rivera's life," he said finally. "He is walking, healing, going home to his mother next month. That is what is left." "One life," Emma said. "I traded my legs for one life. Was it worth it?" "Are you asking me if he is worth it? Or are you asking me if you made the right choice?" "Both. Neither. I do not know what I am asking." Coleman leaned back in his chair. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. "Your father asked me a similar question once, about Tommy Kern. Was staying with him worth the cost? I told him there is no answer, only the choice you make and how you carry it afterward." "That is not helpful, Sergeant Major." "No, but it is true, He picked up the folder and handed it to her. "Marcus wanted me to give you this." Emma opened the folder. Inside were drawings, dozens of them. Marcus's artwork, sketches of the FOB, of soldiers, of Emma treating casualties, and one large portrait drawn with painstaking detail. Emma in her combat uniform, wearing her medic armband, eyes focused and hands steady. Beneath it, in Marcus's careful handwriting, were words. To Corporal Emma Hayes, who showed me what courage really means. Every life I touch from this moment forward is because you chose to save mine. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift. Thank you for staying. Marcus Rivera. Emma stared at the drawing until tears blurred her vision. This was what she had saved. Not just a life, but a future. Not just Marcus, but everyone he would help, everyone he would teach, everyone who would be touched by the choice Emma made in a few seconds of combat. He wants to visit you, Coleman said. Him and his mother. They are flying in from Nebraska next week if you are willing to see them. Emma wiped her eyes. Yes, tell him yes. Coleman stood to leave, then paused at the door. Hayes, you need to understand something. You are not done being a medic. The field is not the only place healing happens. The work you do next, whatever it is, will matter just as much, maybe more. How can you say that? I am in a wheelchair. So are a lot of people, and they need someone who understands what they are going through, someone who made the hard choice and survived it, someone who can show them that life does not end when your body changes. He left before Emma could respond, but his words stayed with her as the sun finished setting and the room grew dark. Coleman paused in the hallway, pulling out his phone. He needed to make a call, to update someone on Emma's condition, someone who had been waiting for news with the kind of fear only a parent could feel. But first, he looked at the folder in his hand, the one he had not shown Emma yet, the one that contained her promotion orders. The battlefield promotion to corporal that had come through after the Phoebe Chapman attack. Recognition of her courage under fire, her exceptional performance in treating casualties even before that final day. The promotion was dated 2 weeks before the attack. Emma had earned it through her work, not her sacrifice. Coleman would tell her that later, when she was ready to hear it, when she could understand that she had been exceptional even before the 7 wounds. The next morning, Emma met Dr. Rachel Foster. The physical therapist was 42 years old, muscular and confident, with a prosthetic left leg visible beneath her shorts. She rolled into Emma's room in her own wheelchair, moving with practiced ease. Emma Hayes, Rachel said by way of greeting, I hear you are feeling sorry for yourself. Emma blinked, surprised by the directness. Excuse me? Sorry for yourself. Poor Emma, lost her legs, cannot walk. Life is over. Am I close? That is pretty harsh. Yes, and also true. Rachel wheeled closer. I lost my leg to an IED in Iraq in 2007. Spent 6 months feeling exactly how you feel right now. Like my life was over. Like I was broken. Like nothing would ever be okay again. And then what happened? And then I got tired of feeling sorry for myself, started PT, learned to use a prosthetic, went back to school, became a physical therapist, met my wife, had 2 kids, built a life that is actually better than the one I had before I got blown up. Rachel gestured to Emma's wheelchair. That chair does not define you. How you use it does. Now let us get to work. The physical therapy was brutal. Not physically painful, though there was plenty of that, but emotionally exhausting. Emma had to learn everything from the beginning. How to transfer from bed to wheelchair without assistance. How to navigate doorways and ramps. How to strengthen her upper body to compensate for her legs. How to live in a world designed for people who could walk. She hated it. Hated feeling weak and incompetent. Hated needing help with things that used to be automatic. Hated the looks of pity from people who saw her struggling. But Rachel was relentless. Pushing her, challenging her, refusing to let her quit. You ran toward gunfire to save a soldier, Rachel said during a particularly difficult session. You took 7 knife wounds and survived. You can damn sure learn to do a transfer without falling on your face. By the end of the first week, Emma could move from bed to wheelchair independently. By the end of the second week, she could navigate the hospital corridors without assistance. Small victories that felt enormous. And slowly the depression began to lift. Not disappear, but lighten. Emma started to see that maybe Coleman was right. Maybe her life was not over. Maybe it was just different. Marcus Rivera arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late June. He walked into Emma's room with a slight limp, his mother Lucia beside him. Emma barely recognized him. The scared 19-year-old from the fob was gone. In his place was someone who carried himself with new confidence, someone who had faced death and come through it transformed. Lucia Rivera was a small woman with Marcus's eyes and a warmth that filled the room. She moved to Emma's wheelchair immediately and took her hands. Thank you, Lucia said. Tears streamed down her face. Thank you for my son. Thank you for staying with him. Thank you for being willing to die so he could live. Emma found herself crying too. I am glad he is okay. That is all that matters. No, Lucia said firmly. You matter too. What you sacrifice matters. And I want you to know that I see you. That we see you, that you will always be part of our family. Marcus sat beside Emma's wheelchair. He looked at her with an expression of such profound gratitude that Emma had to look away. I watched you take those knife wounds, Marcus said. His voice was steady, but emotion strained the edges. I was barely conscious, but I saw. I understood what you were doing. You were choosing to die so I could live. I was doing my job, Emma said. No, your job was triage. Your job was to save the most lives possible. Staying with me was not the logical choice. It was the human choice, and it changed me. He pulled out his phone and showed her pictures. I am enrolling in a physician assistant program. Starting in the fall, I want to work in emergency medicine. I want to do what you did. Save people. Be there when they need someone most. Marcus, you do not have to do that because of me. I know, but I want to. You showed me what I am capable of. Showed me that one person can make a difference. That choosing to care, even when it costs you everything, is the most important thing we can do. Lucia nodded. My son came home from Afghanistan different, stronger, more focused. Because you gave him a second chance at life, and now he is going to use that chance to help others. They stayed for 2 hours, talking about Nebraska and Emma's recovery and the future they were all building. When they left, Lucia hugged Emma tightly. You are a hero, she whispered. Not because you took those wounds, but because you understood that my son's life was worth saving. That means everything. After they left, Emma sat alone in her room with Marcus's drawing propped on her bedside table. She looked at the portrait he had drawn of her, at the focused eyes and steady hands, at the person she had been in Afghanistan, and she realized that person was not gone. She had not lost herself when she lost her legs. She had simply changed form. The courage was still there. The determination was still there. The need to help others was still there. She just had to figure out how to channel it in new ways. August 2019, Walter Reed Conference Room. Emma had been at Walter Reed for 3 months when the Army intelligence officer requested a meeting. She wheeled into the conference room uncertain what to expect. The officer, a major named Patricia Henderson, sat across from her with a laptop and a serious expression. Corporal Hayes, thank you for meeting with me. I need to discuss a sensitive matter regarding your attack at FOB Chapman. Emma felt her stomach tighten. What about it? One of the Taliban fighters who participated in the assault on you has surrendered to coalition forces. He is requesting asylum and has provided valuable intelligence in exchange. But he has also specifically asked to speak with you. Emma stared. Why would he want to speak to me? His name is Zahir. He was one of the 3 fighters who encountered you and Private Rivera. According to his statement, he witnessed your actions that day. He says it changed his understanding of the conflict. Major Henderson opened her laptop and turned it to show Emma a video feed. A young man, maybe 22, sat in a bare room. His eyes were haunted but determined. This is a secure feed to a facility in Germany where Zahir is being held. If you are willing, we can establish communication now. But I want to be clear that you are under no obligation to speak with him. He participated in the attack that nearly killed you. Emma looked at the face on the screen. This man had been there, had watched her take knife wounds, had been part of the assault that cost her the use of her legs. She should hate him, should want nothing to do with him. But Emma thought about her father's words, about choosing to be human in the middle of war, about understanding that even enemies were people with their own stories and reasons. Connect the call, Emma said. The video activated. Zahir looked directly at the camera, at Emma, and his expression filled with something complicated, shame and respect and sorrow all mixed together. Corporal Hayes, he said, in accented English. A translator sat beside him, ready to help. But Zahir spoke on his own. I am sorry, that is what I needed to say. I am sorry for what happened to you. Emma did not know what she expected, but it was not this, not an apology. You were there, she said. You saw. Yes, I saw you cover the wounded soldier with your body. I saw you refuse to leave him even when Habib attacked you with a knife. I saw courage that I did not know existed. Zahir leaned forward, his face intense. My father was killed by an American drone 2 years ago. He was at a wedding. Not a fighter, just a farmer. I joined the Taliban because I wanted revenge, because I believed Americans were monsters who did not value life. And then you saw me, Emma said quietly, And then I saw you, choosing to die to protect one soldier. Not because he was important, not because he was a high-value target, just because he was a human being who needed help. It broke something in me, made me question everything I believed. So you surrendered. Yes, I could not fight anymore after that day. Could not believe that Americans were the enemy when I had seen one willing to sacrifice everything for a fellow soldier. I gave up my weapon and walked to a coalition checkpoint. They thought I was a suicide bomber at first, but I kept saying I wanted to surrender, that I had information to share. Major Henderson spoke. Zahir has provided intelligence that has prevented multiple attacks. He has likely saved dozens of American lives with what he shared. Emma looked at this young man who had been her enemy, who had watched her nearly die, who had been changed by witnessing an act of mercy. "What will you do now?" she asked. "If I am granted asylum, I want to study medicine. I want to help people the way you helped that soldier. I want to be a healer instead of a fighter." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Here was another ripple, another life changed by the choice she made. Not just Marcus, who would become a physician assistant, but Zahir, an enemy who had been transformed by witnessing sacrifice. "I forgive you," Emma said. The words came without planning. "For being there, for being part of what happened to me. I forgive you." Zahir's eyes filled with tears. "Why, I do not deserve your forgiveness." "Maybe not, but I give it anyway, because holding on to anger will not bring my legs back, and because you are trying to be better. That is what matters." They talked for another 30 minutes, about war and peace, about choices and consequences, about the possibility of healing even when bodies and nations are broken. When the call ended, Emma sat quietly for a moment. Major Henderson closed her laptop. "That was extraordinary," the major said. "What you just did." "What did I do?" "You showed mercy to someone who was part of the attack that disabled you. Most people could not do that." Emma thought about her father, about Tommy Kern, about 50 years of carrying guilt for a choice that was not wrong. "Mercy is what medics do," she said, "even when it is hard, especially when it is hard." October 2019, Walter Reed. Emma had been at Walter Reed for 6 months when Sergeant Major Coleman returned with news. "How would you feel about having some visitors?" he asked. "A lot of visitors." "What are you talking about?" "Your story has spread through the military community. What you did at Chapman, the 7 wounds, saving Rivera. There are people who want to honor that. Specifically, there is a Marine Reserve unit from Nebraska who have requested permission to visit. They are Rivera's hometown unit. 30 Marines. Emma felt overwhelmed. "Why Marines? I am Army." "Because you saved one of theirs. Rivera enlisted in the Marines after he recovered. Did you know that?" Emma had not known. Marcus had mentioned wanting to serve more, but she had not known he chose the Marines. "He says he wants to be like you," Coleman continued. "Wants to be a combat medic. And his hometown unit wants to honor the person who made that possible." The ceremony was scheduled for a week later. Emma was nervous. She had been working with Rachel Foster on wheelchair mobility, growing more confident in her ability to navigate the world. But facing 30 Marines felt daunting. The day arrived with crisp fall weather. Emma wore her Army dress uniform, modified to fit her seated position. She wheeled into the conference room expecting a simple presentation. What she found took her breath away. The hallway outside the conference room was lined with Marines in dress blue uniforms. Not 30, more like 40. They stood at attention in 2 perfect rows, creating a corridor. At the end of the corridor stood Marcus in his Marine uniform, and beside him, to Emma's shock, stood 10 elderly men in suits with Vietnam veteran caps. Leading them was Colonel Frank Mitchell, 76 years old, walking with a cane, but standing straight and proud. Coleman leaned down to Emma. Mitchell flew in from Florida, brought some of his Vietnam medics with him. They wanted to be here. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she began to wheel down the corridor. As she passed each Marine, they saluted, held the salute, a sign of respect that transcended rank and service. At the end of the corridor, Colonel Mitchell stepped forward. His old eyes were clear and bright. "Corporal Emma Hayes," he said, his voice carrying decades of command. "I served with your father in Vietnam. I was there the day he made the choice that haunted him for 50 years. The day he stayed with a dying soldier named Tommy Kern while the rest of us moved to safety." Mitchell paused, emotion thick in his voice. "I was hard on your father that day. Told him he made the wrong choice, that he put one life above the mission, that he got men killed. I have regretted those words for 50 years. He moved closer to Emma's wheelchair. But you showed me what I should have seen then, that your father did not make the wrong choice. He made the human choice. The choice to value every life, to give dignity to someone in their worst moment. You did the same thing he did, and you proved that mercy is not weakness. It is the highest form of courage. Mitchell saluted Emma. The entire corridor of Marines followed suit, and then one by one, the Vietnam veterans stepped forward. They were old men now, in their 70s, bodies worn by time and war, but they stood tall as they each approached Emma's wheelchair. I am John Peterson, the first said, combat medic, Vietnam, 68 to 69. I made the same choice your father made, stayed with a dying Marine instead of moving with the squad. I have carried guilt for that choice for 51 years, until today. Thank you for showing me I was not wrong. David Wu, combat medic, Vietnam, 67 to 68. I left a dying soldier to save others. Made the logical choice. But I have dreamed of that soldier's face every night since. You remind me why we became medics in the first place. Thomas Reeves, combat medic, Vietnam, 70 to 71. Brother of Jimmy Reeves, who was killed the day your father stayed with Tommy Kern. I want you to know that I have never blamed your father for my brother's death. Jimmy knew the risks. He would have wanted your father to stay with Tommy. We all would have. One by one, 10 Vietnam combat medics shared their stories, their choices, their guilt, and their pride, their understanding that being a medic meant carrying impossible burdens and making impossible decisions. When they finished, Marcus stepped forward. He stood at attention and saluted Emma. Then he spoke, his voice clear and strong. Corporal Hayes, I am alive because you chose mercy over safety, because you valued my life enough to trade your mobility for it. I have enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. I am training to become a Navy corpsman attached to Marine units. I am going to be a combat medic because you showed me what that means. He reached into his uniform and pulled out something small, held it out to Emma. It was his Navy corpsman warfare device, the badge he would earn when he completed training. When I earn this, it will be because of you. Every life I save, every soldier I help, will be because you gave me a future. I will carry your example with me every day. Emma took the badge with shaking hands. She looked at Marcus, at these Marines, at these Vietnam veterans who had carried their choices for half a century, at Colonel Mitchell, who had finally forgiven himself for being hard on a young medic named Robert Hayes. And she understood what Coleman had been trying to tell her. She was not done being a medic. She was just beginning a different kind of healing. One that would reach across generations and services and wars. One that would show others that mercy was not weakness. That choosing to value life, even when the cost was high, was the most important thing any person could do. Thank you, Emma said. Her voice broke with emotion. All of you. Thank you for showing me that what I did mattered. That the choice I made was not just about saving Marcus. It was about showing that every life has value. That mercy is worth fighting for. A Marine general stepped forward. Emma had not noticed him among the others. He carried a flag folded in the traditional triangle. Corporal Hayes, the United States Marine Corps wishes to present you with this flag. It flew over Marine Corps Base Quantico. We fly flags for Marines who have earned our highest respect. You may be Army, but you are family to us. Because you saved one of ours. Because you embodied everything we aspire to be. The ceremony concluded with all the Marines and Vietnam veterans saluting Emma one final time. Then slowly they filed out. But Colonel Mitchell remained. I need to tell you something, he said. Your father wrote me a letter, first time in 50 years. He said you helped him forgive himself. That watching you make his choice and carry it with strength showed him that he had not been wrong all those years ago. Mitchell's eyes were wet. I wrote him back, told him what I should have said in '69, that he was right to stay with Tommy. That mercy matters. That being a medic means being willing to carry the weight of impossible choices. Thank you for giving us both peace. After Mitchell left, Emma sat alone in the conference room with the Marine Corps flag on her lap and Marcus's badge in her hand. She thought about her father, about Tommy Kern, about all the medics throughout history who had faced the choice between mission and mercy. And she thought about herself, about the woman she had become, about the purpose she would find in her new life. She was not broken. She was transformed, forged in the fire of war into something stronger and more compassionate than she had been before. Emma Hayes was 24 years old and paralyzed from the waist down, but she was not done serving. she was just beginning. November 2024, 5 years later. The Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall in Columbus, Ohio was full to capacity. Veterans Day had drawn people from across the state. But today's ceremony was special. Today, Robert Hayes was going to tell his daughter's story. Emma sat in the front row, her wheelchair positioned where she could see her father at the podium. She was 29 now, stronger, more confident. She had built a life that mattered. In the 5 years since Afghanistan, Emma had completed her bachelor's degree in psychology from an online program while still in rehabilitation, then her master's in counseling. She now worked as a peer support counselor for the Wounded Warrior Project, helping newly disabled veterans navigate their new realities. She had started a YouTube channel called Rolling Forward, where she discussed disability, PTSD, transition from military to civilian life. It had grown to 500,000 subscribers. Her videos helped veterans understand they were not alone, that life did not end when their bodies changed. She had published a memoir called 7 Wounds, One Choice that became a New York Times bestseller. The book told her story, but also her father's story, Tommy Kern's story, the story of every medic who had ever faced the impossible decision. And she had married Tyler Grant, her friend from basic training who had visited her throughout her recovery. They had adopted 2 children whose birth parents could not care for them. Emma proved every day that disability did not prevent someone from being a good parent, from building a family, from living a full life. Marcus Rivera sat beside Emma. He was 28 now, a Navy corpsman who had served 2 tours in Syria and 1 in Afghanistan. He was credited with saving 47 lives in combat. He taught combat medicine at Fort Bragg now, training the next generation of medics. Every year on the anniversary of the attack, Marcus visited Emma. They spent the day together talking about what they had built from the ashes of that April afternoon in Afghanistan, about the ripples spreading outward from one moment of mercy. Sergeant Major William Coleman, now retired, sat in the audience with his wife. He had left the Army after 32 years and opened a private practice specializing in moral injury counseling for combat veterans. He used Emma's story in every session, showed veterans that the choices they made, the ones that haunted them, were not failures. They were the price of being human in inhuman circumstances. Dr. James Chen was there too, still serving as a trauma surgeon. He had published a medical paper about Emma's survival titled Against the Odds, Survival After 7 Penetrating Wounds. Her case was now taught in military medical training as an example of what the human body could endure and what skilled trauma care could accomplish. And in the back row, unnoticed by most, sat a man in his late 20s with a translator beside him. Zahir had been granted asylum 5 years ago. He had completed medical school and was now a physician working with refugee health services in Germany. He had flown to America specifically for this ceremony, to honor the woman whose mercy had transformed his life. Robert Hayes began to speak. He told the story that Emma knew by heart now, about Vietnam, about Tommy Kern, about the choice he made and the guilt he carried, about his daughter enlisting against his wishes, about the attack at F.O. Chapman. He told about the 7 knife wounds, about Emma refusing to abandon Marcus, about her paralysis and her recovery, about the Marines who honored her, about the legacy she had built. My daughter taught me something I should have learned 50 years ago, Robert said, his voice strong and clear. She taught me that mercy is not weakness, that choosing to value one life, even when the cost is high, is the bravest thing any person can do. She taught me to forgive myself. He paused, looking at Emma. But more than that, she taught me that our choices ripple outward in ways we can never fully measure. I stayed with Tommy Kern. That choice influenced my daughter. Her choice to save Marcus influenced him. Marcus is now training medics who will save hundreds of lives. Emma counsels veterans who go on to help others. Zahir, the enemy fighter who witnessed Emma's sacrifice, is now a doctor helping refugees. Robert's voice grew stronger. We cannot measure the full impact of our choices, cannot count all the lives touched by one moment of mercy, but I know this: every medic who ever stayed with a dying soldier, every medic who ever chose the one over the many, was not wrong. They were human, and their humanity changed the world in ways we are still discovering. The audience applauded, but Robert was not finished. Emma, could you join me up here? Emma wheeled to the podium. Her father took her hand. 5 years ago, I was terrified of what you had become. Paralyzed, wounded, changed forever. I thought the attack had broken you. But I was wrong. You were not broken. You were refined, made into something stronger and more beautiful than you had been before. Robert reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. Dog tags. Tommy Kern's dog tags that he had carried for 55 years. I have been holding on to these since 1969. Holding on to guilt, holding on to shame, but today I want to give them to you. Not because I am passing my burden to you, but because you helped me understand that they were never a burden. They were a gift. A reminder that I chose mercy when I could have chosen mission. That I stayed when I could have left. That I valued one life enough to risk my own. Emma took the dog tags. They were worn smooth by decades of handling. She could barely read the names stamped into the metal, but she knew whose they were, knew what they represented. "Thank you, Dad," she said, "for teaching me what it means to be a medic, for showing me that trying is enough, for giving me the courage to make the hard choice." They embraced, father and daughter, two combat medics separated by 50 years, but united by the same impossible decision. The audience stood and applauded, and in that moment, 3 generations of healing came together. After the ceremony, Emma found herself at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. It was late November, cold. The black wall stretched out like a wound in the earth, reflecting the faces of those who came to remember. Robert was beside her. So was Marcus. So was Coleman. Colonel Mitchell, now 81 but still sharp, had come too. And to Emma's surprise, several of the Vietnam medics from the Marine ceremony 5 years ago had made the trip. They moved slowly along the wall, searching. Robert knew where to find it. Panel 13 East, line 76. He stopped and placed his hand on a name carved into the black granite. "Thomas J. Kern." "Tommy," Robert said quietly, "I brought some people to meet you." Emma wheeled close, touched the name with her fingers. This boy she had never met but who had shaped her entire life. "Tommy, this is my daughter Emma. She is a medic too. She made the same choice I made. Stayed with a wounded soldier when she should have run. She lost her legs because of it, but she saved that soldier's life." Marcus stepped forward. "I am Marcus Rivera, the soldier she saved. I am a Navy corpsman now. I teach combat medicine. I have saved 47 lives because Emma gave me a future. Those lives are yours too, Tommy, because Emma's choice came from her father's choice, and her father's choice started with you." One by one, they introduced themselves to a name on a wall, told Tommy Kern about the ripples that spread from one moment in a rice paddy in 1969. Coleman, Chen, Mitchell, the Vietnam medics, each sharing how Robert's choice had influenced them, how it had shaped their understanding of what it meant to be a healer in war. And then Zahir stepped forward. Through his translator, he spoke. "My name is Zahir. I was an enemy fighter in Afghanistan. I saw Emma Hayes take 7 knife wounds to protect Marcus Rivera. Witnessing that sacrifice changed me, made me abandon war and pursue medicine. I am now a doctor helping refugees, people who have lost everything and need someone to care. I learned to care from watching an American medic choose mercy over survival." Robert looked at this young man who had been his daughter's enemy, who had been transformed by witnessing the same choice Robert made 50 years ago. "Thank you," Robert said, "for letting what you saw change you, for choosing to heal instead of hurt." Tommy would have liked that. They stood together at the wall as the sun set. 3 generations, 3 wars, one choice echoing across decades. Emma looked at her father, at the man who had carried guilt for 55 years and finally found peace. She thought about Tommy Kern, about the boy who died knowing someone cared enough to stay, about all the lives touched by that one moment of mercy. She thought about Marcus, who would train hundreds of medics in his career, about those medics saving thousands of lives, about those lives touching millions of others, ripples spreading outward forever. She thought about Zahir, healing refugees, about the patients he would help, about the hope he would give to people who had lost everything. She thought about herself, about the veterans she counseled, about the YouTube videos that helped people understand disability did not mean defeat, about the book that showed others how to carry impossible choices without being crushed by them. All of it starting from one 19-year-old medic in Vietnam who stayed with a dying soldier, who chose mercy when mission said he should not, who carried guilt for 55 years until his daughter showed him the truth. "Dad," Emma said, "I want to leave something here." She pulled out Marcus's Navy corpsman badge, the one he had given her 5 years ago. She placed it at the base of the wall, beneath Tommy Kern's name. "For all the medics," she said, "for everyone who ever made the hard choice, Whoever stayed when they should have run, whoever chose the one over the many, this is for them. Robert placed his hand on Emma's shoulder, squeezed gently. He would be proud, Robert said. Tommy, he would be proud of what his death made possible, of the lives saved because I stayed with him, of the legacy that came from one moment of mercy. They stood together in the gathering darkness, a family united by service and sacrifice, in the understanding that love could not be calculated, that mercy mattered more than mathematics, that choosing to be human in the middle of hell was the highest form of courage any person could demonstrate. Emma looked at her wheelchair, at her legs that would never walk again, at the price she paid for choosing Marcus over her own safety, and she knew with absolute certainty that she would make the same choice again. Because Marcus was alive, because her was healing instead of fighting, because her father had finally forgiven himself, because she had shown that disability was not defeat, because she had proven that one moment of mercy could echo across generations and change the world in ways too vast to measure. 7 wounds had marked her body, but they had healed her father's soul, had saved Marcus's life, had transformed an enemy, had inspired thousands, had created a legacy that would outlive them all. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Epilogue. Present day. Emma Hayes is now 34 years old. She is the Director of Peer Support Services for the Wounded Warrior Project, overseeing a team of counselors who help newly wounded veterans transition to civilian life. Her YouTube channel has grown to 2 million subscribers. She speaks at military bases across the country, teaching the next generation of medics about the choice between mission and mercy, about carrying impossible decisions without being crushed by them. She and Tyler have 4 children now, 2 adopted and 2 biological. She has proven that wheelchair users can be excellent parents, active community members, full participants in life. Marcus Rivera is 33, a Master Chief Petty Officer. He teaches at the Navy Medicine Training Center, training thousands of corpsmen and combat medics. His students know Emma's story. They understand that being a medic means more than medical skills. It means being willing to choose mercy even when the cost is high. Every life Marcus saves is a ripple from Emma's choice. Every medic he trains is an extension of her legacy. The number of people helped by Emma's decision that April day in Afghanistan cannot be calculated. It spreads too far, touches too many. Sergeant Major William Coleman is 67, fully retired now. He runs a foundation that provides mental health support for combat veterans dealing with moral injury. The foundation is called the Kern Hayes Initiative, named for Tommy Kern and Robert Hayes. It has helped over 3,000 veterans process their wartime choices and find peace. Dr. James Chen is 54. He still serves as a trauma surgeon, now training the next generation of military doctors. He uses Emma's case in every lecture, shows medical students that sometimes miracles happen, sometimes people survive against impossible odds, and sometimes the will to live, the will to save others, can overcome any injury. Robert Hayes is 79. He finally retired from his work as a paramedic at 65. He volunteers with Coleman's Foundation, counseling veterans who carry guilt about wartime decisions. He tells them about Tommy Kern, about the choice he made and the 55 years it took him to forgive himself. He tells them about his daughter, who made the same choice and carried it with strength he never found. He no longer hides his medals. They sit on his desk where he can see them every day. Not as symbols of failure, but as reminders that he chose to be human when war tried to make him into a machine. That mercy mattered. That trying was enough. Zahir is 37, a physician in Berlin. He specializes in treating refugees from war zones, particularly from Afghanistan and Syria. People who have lost everything and need someone who understands. Someone who knows what war does to people. Someone who chose healing over hatred. He keeps a photograph on his desk. Emma Hayes in her combat uniform, taken before the attack. Someone found the photo among her belongings at Fort Chapman and sent it to him. He looks at it every day and remembers the moment that changed his life. The moment he saw an enemy choose mercy. Colonel Frank Mitchell passed away in 2022 at the age of 79. He lived long enough to see Emma's work flourish, long enough to speak at her book launch, long enough to finally make peace with the hard decisions he made as a young commander in Vietnam. His funeral was attended by 3 generations of medics whose lives he influenced. Tommy Kern's name remains on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall, panel 13 East, line 76. Every year on Memorial Day and Veterans Day, someone places flowers there. Sometimes it is Robert. Sometimes it is Emma. Sometimes it is one of the Vietnam medics who heard the story and understood. And every year, beneath those flowers, you can find a Navy Corpsman badge, the symbol of medics who run toward danger instead of away from it, of people who choose mercy when mission says they should not. The badge is replaced annually. As soon as one medic graduates training, they place their old badge at the wall and carry a new one into service, a tradition that started with Marcus Rivera and spread through the military medical community. Each badge represents a promise to value every life, to stay when others run, to choose mercy when the cost is high, to carry forward the legacy of a 19-year-old medic from Ohio who stayed with a dying soldier in Vietnam, and of that medic's daughter who 50 years later made the same choice and showed the world that mercy is the highest form of courage. 7 wounds, 2 wars, 3 generations, one choice that echoed forever. This is the story of Emma Hayes and Robert Hayes, father and daughter, combat medics, people who understood that love cannot be calculated, that every life matters, that choosing to be human in the middle of hell is what makes us worthy of the peace we fight for. They were not perfect. They did not save everyone. They carried the weight of the ones they could not save for the rest of their lives. But they tried, they stayed, they chose mercy. And in the end, that was enough. That will always be enough. And